Countdown clock is in its final few seconds before the launch of Shuttle Endeavour. We're less than 2 minutes away from launch right now. The 6-man crew is going to spend 10 days in space using a high-tech space radar system similar to the one used for years on spy satellites to monitor environmental changes on the Earth's surface. NASA commentator Bruce Buckingham is the other voice you'll be hearing until liftoff. You see there, about 1 minute 39 seconds before liftoff. This launch, by the way, could be visible for several hundred miles up the east coast of the United States. The shuttle will be traveling north-northeast rather than due east to reach an orbit which can see 95% of the Earth's surface. It has to go north on takeoff in order to get that close to the North Pole so that all of its following orbits will cover so much of the Earth's surface. By evening today, the astronauts will have the space radar operating, sending us the first pictures of the hurricanes around the world, the western United States brush fires, and environmental changes all over the world. German and Italian scientists have developed equipment for the shuttle radar lab, and there are observation sites all over the world. About 2,000 ground-based observers are going to confirm the information coming down from space. For our international viewers, you can stand by for more programming after this. We'll have some word for you on the latest on the labor crackdown in Nigeria, but before we do that, we will, of course, show you this launch, so stay with us for that. In the final 30 seconds, we'll listen to Bruce Buckingham as he comments on the shuttle's liftoff.
When we have a go for auto sequence start, Endeavour's onboard computers have primary control of all the vehicle's critical functions. T-minus 20. T-minus 15 seconds. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. We have a go for main engine start. We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1, and have main engine cut off. GLS safing is in progress.
Pass 101, BFS motor to 102, LED shows 1. Copy, launch team, that's page 909.
We have a cutoff of the main engines. The countdown clock has stopped.
CDR, perform BFS safety.
We've got a problem with the Shuttle Endeavour out on launch pad 39A. What happened was that the main engine shut down at about half a second before the solid rocket boosters were scheduled to be ignited. You can see now they're putting the white room back over next to the door so the astronauts can get out of there.
Water is on. Go ahead, CDR. BFS safing is complete. JBFX, have you terminated your launch cooling spray? PLT, perform APU shutdown.
This is bad news. It is probably not dangerous news, but it's bad news for the shuttle program. Let me give you some background that I got from a NASA manager about an hour ago. He said that it was unlikely that they were going to have a problem like this, but the fact is...
NPL, fire and leak detectors. F31. We look good, on green. Copy.
The fact is there have been technical problems with this shuttle more than on any of the previous 3 or 4 shuttle missions that have had to be solved by ground controllers and the engineers going inside the shuttle over the past couple of days. The NASA mission manager that I talked to about an hour ago suggested to me that if this particular scenario occurred, where they had the main engines fired and now, as you can see, they're filling them with water, it could well be 2 weeks before this shuttle could take off. We won't know that for certain until they've assessed the damage to the main engines, which were very, very hot just about 60 seconds ago and are now getting cold and wet from this water deluge that is cooling them down, so the shuttle will be safe.
Computers has occurred unscheduled. Everything appears to be safe with the crew.
935, ISL. ISL verified. DPS?
DPS verified.
CCME? CCME verified. CSME?
Since the Challenger disaster back in 1986, this is the most serious safety problem that's ever occurred with a shuttle.
Client verifies 8910. CLOX? CLOX verifies 11 and 12. HTD? HTD verifies 13 and 14. CGSF? CGSF verifies 15. APU? APU verifies 16. CBHY? CBHY verifies 17. EPD. EPD verifies 18 and 19.
You can hear people verifying numbers, which started at 1 and are now up to 18, 19, or 20. These are emergency safety procedures on a checklist that have been being completed by on the shuttle itself by the crew and by ground managers as they go through these procedures.
Checks. Everything continues in order after this unscheduled cutoff of our main engines, just milliseconds prior to liftoff.
Up on step 22, CDR OTC, reconfigure heater. Roger. Heater reconfig is inward. Copy.
There are more than 400 switches inside the shuttle cockpit that the pilot and the commander are now having to put in a safe position rather than a launch position, and they have to verify this with controllers on the ground.
Flight controller power switch off.
What they're doing is shutting down electrical systems on board one by one so that there could be no spark, which could potentially create trouble later.
Bus source, fuel cell 1, 2, and 3 switches, all 3 off.
They're going down a circuit breaker panel now, cutting off the various power sources to various parts of the shuttle orbiter.
That's complete. Copy. Panel F8, the flight controller power switch off. That's complete. CGSS OTC verify OA is extended, locked, and configured for retract. CGSS can verify. NOC CGLS can configure, we're configured for PCMMU to remote. Okay, CDR panel C3.
What has to happen before the crew gets out of the shuttle? Just a minute, we'll listen to NASA commentator Bruce Buckingham.
The data that's coming in from the onboard computers, as well as the data that's being assessed by the consoles here in the firing room.
NOTC TLS primary taping is complete, or go for transition to T9. Houston, plug into it.
In order for the crew to get out of there, all these switches that the crew controls inside have to be put in a safe position.
What caused the engine shut off. We anticipate that the crew will shortly begin their egress procedures to leave the vehicle.
Shift 33, verify configured for G1 to G9. CMPL. CMPL's ready. C-lock.
The way the shuttle is set up, it is a two-level flight deck. You have the people who drive the thing, the commander and the pilot, and one other crew member on the upper level where the windows are so that they can look out. The other 3 crew members are down below them. And the way you get out of there is through that hatch on the side. And in general, people come out in the opposite order of the way they get in. So the payload specialists, the ones on the lower level, would almost certainly be the first ones to come out. But inside the shuttle orbiter right now, there is an abnormal for the Earth atmospheric pressure. They sort of pump it up like a balloon to have it at flight pressure. And they're going to have to open the hatch to release that pressure before they can come out.
On the engines, no indication of fire. Would like to shut off the heat fuel water. Okay, you've got to go, Super. Thank you, sir. Okay, I copy CQMA.
At any rate, this problem with this launch of the shuttle is going to cause NASA to have to crunch its schedule a little bit. It was expected that on the 9th of September, another shuttle would be leaving from Launch Pad 39B at Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center. That will probably now have to be delayed because NASA is not able at this moment to keep 2 shuttles in space at the same time. They only have 1 operating control room, and you have to have 2 to have 2 shuttles in orbit. They've never done that before. They certainly may have this mission and the next mission going up at close to the same time, however, with only a couple of days between.
TBC verifies 249. Copy, TBC.
The preliminary assessment is that we had a problem with our main engine number 3, high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump. We are still continuing to assess the data as it arrives in the firing room.
In case you missed that, the shuttle was scheduled to lift off about 6 minutes ago. The 3 main engines had been brought up to full power, or almost full power. With less than a second to go before the shuttle was to leave the pad, the computer shut down all 3 main engines. There was a lot of black smoke coming out of there, which was expectable. And let me show you the video of what that looked like about 6 minutes ago as the launch was down in the last final seconds. We'll just watch it. You can listen to the commentary at the time, and I'll tell you what I know about what has happened.
We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1, and Have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
Pass 101, BFS loaded to 102, LDP
Very
shows 1.
surprising event there.
LDP received, 4 miles GLS 4, GLS safing is in progress. Copy, launch team, that's page 909.
We have a cutoff of the main engines. The countdown clock has stopped.
An unusual happening. This has happened once or twice before in the history of the shuttle program. What happens is that there is an onboard computer that tests all 3 of the main engines in the last 5 seconds before liftoff. Main engine 1 came on, operated correctly. Main engine 2 came on, operated correctly. Main engine number 3 came on and was beginning to operate correctly when a sensor that was connected to the computer sensed that one of 2 very fast-turning pumps, called turbo pumps, was operating in an incorrect way. It was not putting enough liquid oxygen down into that engine's firing chamber to create the right amount of thrust. So the computer said, okay, we're shutting everything off before the solid rocket motors, which can't be shut off, were ignited.
OTC, MTSU, ignition checks complete. Okay, I copy that. NT. Standby 1.
What we've been told is that the 6 crew members will be allowed to get out of the shuttle as soon as all the configuration checks, in other words, all the switches are put in the right aspect.
Situation with main engine number 3, the high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump. The specifics are still unclear. That information is coming into the firing room, and we anticipate to have that information available shortly.
Let me tell you a little bit while we wait for more information on this, how the shuttle propulsion system works. You see those 3 big engines there at the bottom of the space shuttle. They provide the main power to get the shuttle into orbit. You can see steam coming out of one, the one that was closest to the camera there a minute ago. Those 3 engines operate through a mixture of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. They join together down there in that chamber that you saw. They're ignited by an electrical spark. They explode, and that provides most of the power for the shuttle.
There is no indication of any hazardous vapors or any flammable situation at the pad. The crew is reporting safe. The vehicle is reporting safe.
In the original design of the space shuttle, it was going to try to get into orbit with only those 3 engines because they're so easy to control. You can turn a knob and increase the flow of liquid oxygen and hydrogen. We'll listen to the
main engine
recap
shut
again
off
here.
just milliseconds prior to solid rocket booster ignition. The shutoff was caused by the ground launch sequencer cutting off as a result of apparent misinformation being received from one of thousands of sources of information. In this particular case, the data seems to be coming from the main engine number 3 high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump, that something went wrong within that turbo pump. We're not sure exactly what, but it did cause the main engines to cut off.
I'll check with EPD.
At any rate, these main engines are very complicated pieces of equipment. Rather than just having the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen flow together in the combustion chamber, they have to be forced together at a very high rate of speed. So NASA made a decision to put in turbo pumps, pumps that increase the force and the pressure on the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen stored in that huge red tank there to make the shuttle lift off and to force the initial ignition of those engines. And what we're going to do now is take a brief break, but what we'll do is we'll continue to stay here. I'll continue to monitor this. As soon as the astronauts begin to come out, I imagine we'll be able to show you those pictures. And we'll let you know that they are safe as soon as we know that for ourselves for sure. So we urge you to stay tuned to CNN and CNN International, because we'll continue our coverage of this situation, which was potentially dangerous, and I won't be satisfied until we see those astronauts out there and away from Launch Pad 39A. CNN News will continue in just a moment. Stay with us.
LTC's sequencer.
6 astronauts and the world's most sophisticated radar on board.
And Florida's governor wants help from Washington right now as more Cuban refugees are setting their sights and fells on Florida.
This is Daybreak on CNN. News to start your day with Bob Kane and Andrea Arsenault.
as Space Shuttle Endeavour stalls on the launch pad 1 second before plan to lift off. CNN's John Holloman is here with the latest. John.
Andrea, good morning. A remarkable and dramatic moment in the final seconds of the countdown for Space Shuttle Endeavour. It was supposed to lift off about 15 minutes ago now. Let me first show you the picture of the final seconds of the countdown. You can see what NASA managers with shocked looks on their faces were looking at in the final 1 second of the countdown.
We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1. And have main engine cut off. GLS safing is in progress.
Pass 101, DFS loaded to 102, LDB shows 1. Headed to USD, 4 miles aboard. GLS safing is in progress. Copy, launch team, that's page 909.
We have a cutoff of the main engines. The countdown clock has stopped.
CDR, perform DFS safing.
So, you saw that if you were watching our live coverage just a few minutes ago. CNN's Paul Karen is on the phone with us now live from the Kennedy Space Center. Paul, I know you're located relatively close to the Kennedy Space Center press office. What are people telling you down there as to what happened and why and what it may mean to the shuttle program?
Well, John, what they're saying is so far they're looking at the data coming in on their computers from on board, but the early prognosis is a problem with the high-pressure oxygen turbo pump on main engine number 3. And, John, as you probably know, anytime you have a start above the engines and a sudden shutdown on the launch pad, it will cause a 10-day to 2-week delay in this shuttle launch, which will affect the next shuttle launch, which was scheduled originally to take off in 3 weeks.
Right, Paul. As I understand it, the astronauts are still on board, and NASA continues to tell us that they report they are safe on board the shuttle Endeavour, but in a situation like this, that shuttle is never more dangerous than it is with that 500,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and in a position to be ready to leave the Earth and not able to leave. So we, of course, will be watching very closely to see whether the astronauts can begin to get out of there. The live picture, actually we're looking, the live picture that we're seeing of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida is a picture that shows you the access arm over there connected next to the hatch where the astronauts will be able to come out. We're hoping there'll be a camera that'll show us a live camera picture from that area as ground teams open the hatch so the astronauts do come out. Paul, you know, you've covered many of these shuttle missions. To my memory, this is the second or maybe the third time that NASA has had to stop the shuttle at a time when the main engines were firing before the solid rocket boosters went off. And as I look back, it's always been a computer glitch like this where the computer told the main engines they couldn't light the solid rockets and couldn't leave the Earth on schedule because of one problem or another.
Yes, and in fact, if my memory serves correct, the last time this happened was probably about a year ago. And as you said, it's a rarity for the NASA engineers to have to deal with something like this. A 1 second to lift off, shut off of all the main engines.
Yeah, I'm told that NASA is prepared to hold a news conference as soon as they know what happened exactly. And CNN, for our viewers here and around the world, will be carrying that live so we can know what happened at this very unusual and very, to my way of thinking, scary incident.
Yes, and it's going to take a while, I think, for them to hold that press conference. They're still looking for the data.
The astronauts themselves are safe up in the main cabin. They're continuing to talk to them on their two-way radios, making sure that that's the case. There's 6 astronauts aboard, all men on this particular mission. And what will happen as soon as they get the hatch opened is that the 3 astronauts on the lower of the 2 levels where people sit for launch will come out one by one. There are 3 mission specialists and payload specialists down there, and then the 3 astronauts on the upper deck will come out.
We had a main engine cutoff just before solid rocket booster ignition. The main engine cutoff was caused by the high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump discharge temperature exceeding the red line value. It's still unclear at this time what caused it to exceed the red line value. However, because it did, that violated one of our launch criteria, and the onboard computers caught it and cut the engines off prior to solid rocket booster ignition.
CMPS, OTC.
This high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump discharge temperature occurred on main engine number 3.
Yeah, are you guys ready in a position?
After all 3 engines had been ignited. At this point, we're still assessing the situation, looking for more data to come in.
Yes, sir. All our software is termed.
primary for the next few minutes is to make sure that the crew get out of the vehicle safely. They have all reported safe. It's just a matter now of getting them out of their seats and getting them to the white room and then off the pad.
We'll continue to wait and watch this situation for you. Brian, I know there's a lot more news in the world that we need to share with our viewers. As soon as we see the crew come out, we'll provide you information on their safety, but it appears they are safe now. Shuttle had a technical problem, a major technical problem, with less than 1 second before launch. CNN will continue to cover this live as we get more information. Brian?
Thanks a lot, John. In other news, help. That's what Florida Governor Lawton Chiles is urgently requesting
right now, although they continue to report to ground controllers that they are safe. Here's our live picture. You can see Endeavour out there on launch pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. The weather was looking excellent for this morning's launch. In the final few seconds, there is a series of events that the shuttle's onboard computer takes care of. Ground controllers don't really have much control over the actual final pushing of the button to get the shuttle into space. There's so many things that have to happen in that period of time. It has to be done by a computer. And the way the computer operates is at 5 seconds before launch, the countdown fellow is telling you 6, 5, 4, 3. At 6 and 5, the first of the 3 main engines is fired as a test to make sure it's working, then the second, then the third. As the third main engine was fired, the computer detected something wrong with a high-speed turbo pump that forces liquid oxygen down into the firing chamber along with liquid oxygen. Let's look at that. You will see what happens. There's sort of a wide shot, a shot about like this from this angle as those 3 engines are being tested, and then you'll see this cloud of black smoke as the engines are shut down. Let's watch that now.
We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1, and have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
Pass 101, GSS motor to 102, LED shows 1. Headed to USB, 4 miles of S4. GLS safing is in progress. Copy, launch team, that's page 909.
We have a cutoff of the main engines. The countdown clock has stopped.
This is the astronaut's worst nightmare, quite frankly. With less than a second to go to liftoff, something goes wrong. There's a lot of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen there, which is very volatile, very dangerous, coming out of the bottom of the shuttle, and those guys are stuck up there in the top of the shuttle with no place to go. My colleague, Paul Karen, is on with us now, live from the Kennedy Space Center. Paul, I hope you've been able to talk to some NASA managers to get a little bit more information on what the latest is. The astronauts are still inside the shuttle orbiter, as I understand it, right?
Yes, they are, and that's concern 1 right now, as ground crews rushed out to remove the 6 astronauts who are still strapped to their seats aboard the 2,000-pound shuttle. John, this is the 5th engine shutdown on the pad in 13 years of shuttle flights, and it is a rarity, as you know, but it certainly poses a problem not only for this flight, because it will delay it most likely at the very least 10 days, possibly even a month.
Yeah, Paul, I've got the Space Shuttle Driver's Manual in front of me, and we'll listen now to NASA's current update.
Cutoff of all 3 main engines. The countdown clock was stopped, and we had an unscheduled redundant launch sequencer cutoff, resulting in this launch abort today. The initial assessment shows us that the high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump on main engine number 3, actually the discharge temperature exceeded the red line value, which prompted the engine cutoff. What prompted the red line to be exceeded is still unclear, and it's apparently going to be a number of hours before we have any more specifics on that. We do know that the red line has 2 channels providing information to the computers on board, and one of those channels did indeed go over the red line, and the other channel was very close to the red line. Still, we don't know what caused the red line to be exceeded, just that it was, and that was a violation of our launch configurations for a safe launch, and we had a main engine cutoff. The auxiliary power units were shut down in the safing process. The crew has reported in that they are safe, and the orbiter access arm is back in place. The crew will not be departing until the white room personnel have been dispatched and are in the white room to assist with opening the hatch.
So that's the holdup with getting the crew out.
Again, we are in the safing mode of the vehicle. There are no other concerns on the pad at this time. Our fire detection system was not tripped, indicating that there was no fire on the pad. All the safing procedures were put into place. Mission managers and launch controllers here at Kennedy Space Center responded accordingly to their plans and to their charted out procedures, which are in place just for this kind of a situation.
Closeout crew is en route.
I'm glad to know why the astronauts are still on board there. They're on board because the ground team that's needed out at the pad to open the hatch and let them out isn't out there yet. The reason they're not out there is that at the moment of launch, it's very dangerous out at the launch pad, and so they take all the people other than the astronauts at least 3 miles away. The ground crew, which has these huge motorized wrenches that'll open the bolts in the hatch door, are now in a vehicle on their way back out to the pad to get the crew out. And it's going to be a few more minutes before they get there and can get up on the elevator to let the astronauts out. Paul Karen, I was glad to discover this reason. I guess I'd ignored the fact that you got to have people on the outside to get the astronauts out of the inside of the shuttle.
It's just a matter of time of getting them on that 3-mile trip, which probably seems like an eternity right now to those NASA engineers who are rushing right now to the launch pad, John.
Yeah, and the 6 men who were aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour. I heard Bruce Buckingham, the NASA commentator, just mention something, the point that you made, very well made, Paul, a few minutes ago. It's going to delay the launch of this shuttle by a long period of time, probably at least 10 days up to 2 weeks, and that's going to crunch the schedule for the rest of the year on shuttle launches, because NASA has had, up until this moment, a very ambitious schedule of launches from now till the end of the year.
Well, the next launch was scheduled to take place 3 weeks from today, about 3 weeks, and it pushes things back even further. And then they've, of course, got concerns about the weather once you get into the Florida winter months here.
Yeah, Paul, can you look out the window and see if Launchpad 39B has... I don't think there's a shuttle there now. I think the next shuttle was supposed to be rolled out to 39B sometime in the next couple of days.
You're right. That launch pad is empty at the moment, John.
Yeah, okay. We can't see that on our picture. Thanks for being my eyes on the ground there, our eyes on the ground there at the Kennedy Space Center.
Is your recycle T-20 complete yet?
Oh, there's our CNN picture from Launchpad 39B. There's no shuttle there. And NASA's plan was to roll the next shuttle to be launched out to that pad in this weekend sometime, and have it ready to go on the 9th of September. Now, it could be that mission managers decide to launch the next shuttle before they go back and launch this one. That would be a way to keep the program perhaps a little bit more on schedule.
But you are not complete with your reconfig. Is that firm? Well, we're holding off on standby.
Latest word we have is that the astronauts on board Shuttle Endeavour are going to be coming out the hatch door in about 10 minutes, depending on how long it takes that ground crew to get out there to them. Our coverage will continue as the story continues to unfold here this morning on CNN.
Team Lawrence Shriver and a representative of the main engines and the Marshall Space Flight Center to be there to discuss the cutoff abort this morning.
Bruce Buckingham announcing that NASA is going to have a news conference in a few minutes.
Going to have to be looked at very closely. In situations like this, we normally replace the 3 main engines before we allow Endeavour to fly. That could put us down a couple of weeks at least before the vehicle is going to be ready to go. The history of main engine cutoffs, this is the 5th main engine cutoff that we've had in the history of space shuttle flight. We had one main engine cutoff in 1984 that was on mission 41D. We had one in 1985 on mission 51F. And we had 2 main engine cutoffs last year on STS 51 and STS 55.
Okay, how about steps 28 through 30?
Again, at 6:54 a.m. this morning, the 3 shuttle main engines were commanded to halt by the ground launch sequencer. And the onboard computers of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Safing has been initialized and is now in the process of being completed. And the crew, the 6-member astronaut crew, are just moments away from having the hatch opened and having them egress the vehicle and make their way back to their crew quarters at the operations and checkout building.
242.
Press conference again. The press conference is scheduled for 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time from the Kennedy Space Center to discuss this situation.
Okay, stand by.
So you see now the live picture of ground crew members unbolting bolts that keep the hatch of the shuttle that keep the hatch closed.
When you crack the hatch. We'll do that.
Those ground crew members, one of them now, talking to ground controllers.
We have to depressurize.
Back at the lunchroom. And they say it's going to take several more minutes to get the hatch opened. And if there's an open microphone out there in the White Room, you might hear the whoosh of escaping air as the hatch is opened and depressurized, because there is higher pressure inside than outside.
Is your recycle for 1004 complete?
Well, the best we can do right now, we're not in drain yet. We need to get the crew off first.
Okay, we'll wait on that one.
As you can hear, there are some technicians at NASA who want to do things other than get the astronauts out of there, but the mission managers are saying get those 6 men out of there as quickly as they possibly can. That takes precedence over anything else that they're doing right now. We might, if we can possibly do this, continue to watch as the ground crew members work on the hatch, and also show you what happened when the main engine cutoff occurred. I'm told we have a version of that where we can watch the last 60 seconds of the countdown. You'll be able to see the 3 main engines come on one by one. And
T-minus 1 minute and counting. T-minus 50 seconds and counting, and we are transferring to orbiter internal power at this time. Endeavour is now running off of its 3 onboard fuel cells. Coming up for a go for auto sequence start.
Let's go for auto.
When we have a go for auto sequence start, Endeavour's onboard computers have primary control of all the vehicle's critical functions. T-minus 20. T-minus 15 seconds. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. We have a go for main engine start. We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1. And have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
Pass 101, BFS motor to 102, LDB shows 1. It is the USB, perform RSS board. GLS safing is in progress. Copy, launch team, that's page 909.
We have a cutoff of the main engines. The countdown clock has stopped.
CDR, perform BFS safing. And into the GLS safing is in work. Ignition septics are safe. All engines are in post-shutdown standby. GLS is go for orbiter.
let me explain to you what happened in this sequence of events as best we know it at this time. In order for the shuttle to leave the Earth successfully, about 1,000 events have to happen in the last 5 seconds, including a test procedure of the 3 main engines, and then the 2 solid rocket boosters are ignited to get the shuttle off the ground. The way the main engines work is that a series of pumps increase the pressure of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen going down into the combustion chamber. There's a low-pressure turbo pump which works correctly for the liquid oxygen tank and got the pressure there up to about 400 pounds per square inch. And then the liquid oxygen was forced into another turbo pump which spins at a rate of 24,000 revolutions per minute. Much faster than your record player or CD player. I mean, much, much faster. And the temperature inside there got so hot that it triggered an alarm which shut down the main engines. What we're looking at right now is the live picture. You see a huge yellow hose that's hanging down that provides outside air and exhausts what's air is inside the crew cabin. Right now, the astronauts have been sitting out there for about, for more than 2 hours. The temperature inside the shuttle at this point is probably out of the comfort range. They've been sitting there. The sun has been up for an hour. The air conditioning system, along with all the other electrical systems inside, has been shut down. So they're probably wet with sweat at this point as they wait to get out of there. My colleague Paul Caron joins me again live on the phone from the Kennedy Space Center. Paul, I'm sure you've been talking to the experts there. What's the latest from your end?
Well, NASA engineers have told me, John, that the problem appears to be, as you had mentioned, with the high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump on main engine number 3. Apparently, it shows 2 temperature channels on this pump, and one channel was high into the red zone, and another one was near that. As far as past history with these pumps, they've had problems in the past with these pumps, but in regards to seals on the pump, and NASA engineers have told me this problem today does not appear to be with the seals.
All right, Paul. I'll tell you, if I can show up on TV for just a second, I can sort of illustrate what's going on with this turbo pump, or what apparently went on with it. I may not be able to do that, but the turbo pump is this huge round object like this that spins on a channel, and these channels that they're talking about are little holes in the inner chamber with thermometers in them. There are two thermometers. One of them went above a degree mark that told the computer that there might be a problem, and then the other thermometer started to show the temperature go up as well, and that's when this thing was shut down. Those ground engineers right outside the hatch, the escape route for the shuttle, have just opened it.
Go ahead. Copy that. Thank you.
Normally, the crew
right,
will egress
the shuttle
in
crew,
the same order that they entered the vehicle.
How they're coming out.
That being the case, we should see Dan Birch coming out first.
Probably the last two people that we'll see coming out will be the commander and the pilot, but because they are the people who've had to do most of the work during the past 2 hours, we'll talk about them. Michael Baker was born in 1953, 4 days after my birthday, as a matter of fact, October 27th. He's from Lemoore, California. He graduated from high school there in Lemoore and got a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Texas back in 1975. He's married, and he has 2 children, and he's an experimental test pilot and has been in the astronaut corps since 1985. And he's not that old relative to some of the astronauts, but he is the commander of this mission based on the fact that he has been on the shuttle several previous missions. Terrence Wilcutt is a major in the United States Marine Corps. He's another one born in October 1949. He's about my age, married with 2 children again. He likes to fly, he likes to run, he lifts weights, and he does woodworking. What we're looking at now on television, the ground crew members are now going inside the shuttle, providing some assistance probably to the first of the astronauts to come out. There are, in addition to the 2, the pilot and the commander who we just showed you, the payload commander is former CIA analyst Tom Jones. It may be that Tom is up on the upper deck with the pilot and commander as well. And then down below on the double-decker 2 decks of the shuttle orbiter are the 3 mission specialists. And my guess is, because the astronauts generally come out in the opposite order of the way that they went in, is that we're going to see Dan Birch, who was the last astronaut to get on board first. He's a mission specialist and has been a member of the astronaut corps for more than 5 years. One of these astronauts has only been in the astronaut corps for 2 years. Steve Smith has had a very fast tour from joining the astronaut corps to flying in space. You can see Steve there. He was in the astronaut class of 2 years ago, the first member of that class to fly, and he is flying in the space shuttle much more rapidly than other astronauts have in the past. He was at a news conference a couple of weeks ago, and he laughed about the fact that he got to go first, and he hoped it was because he was so much better than the other astronauts in that class. But these fellows, not to put too fine a point on it, but they all have terrific egos as part of what you need to have the right stuff to be in the astronaut corps. Paul, the hatch door is open now as I see it from here, and we haven't yet seen one of the red flight suits indicating that Dan Birch or one of the other astronauts is coming out. But what are you hearing from a technical point of view about what's causing us to have this time on television together?
Well, it's still the problem, as we had mentioned earlier, with the high-pressure oxidizer turbo pump on main engine number 3. And now one of the questions, of course, that lingers, John, as you know, is how long will the delay of the Space Shuttle Endeavour liftoff actually happen now?
Yeah, well, one of the things that they said they would probably have to do, almost certainly have to do, is go out to the launch pad and pull all 3 main engines off the bottom of this space shuttle. A very time-consuming and painstaking procedure. It's It's not like taking the engine off your car, because these engines are much more fragile than automotive engines, and you can't just have a crane out there to do it. You have to do it in a very meticulous, painstaking manner. They're putting some insulation material out over the hatch now. The hatch was coated with grease before the astronauts went in, and there's the
crew members with their helmets still on are beginning
the astronauts to come out
of Endeavour. 6 astronauts will be egressing in the next few minutes.
I see Tom Jones with his helmet off. He's the second of the 2 astronauts to come out.
It looks like Peter Weissoff was the first to come out, followed by Dan Bursch.
These are the astronauts who sit on the lower deck of the 2-deck shuttle orbiter flight compartment.
And CM2CO2C, steps 141 be not performed, 142 through 147 not performed.
The astronauts normally get in with the one on the left, the one on the right, and the one in the middle. And the way they came out was the one closest to the door first, then the one in the middle.
Go ahead.
We're likely now to see the one on the left of the bottom section coming out.
Copy that.
The astronauts appeared to be not much the worse for wear. They were smiling, although I bet to a man they would tell you they're not happy right now. See that yellow hose going inside now, providing some cooler air to the crew. The astronauts have told me when I've talked to them about sitting out there on the pad waiting to lift off, that the biggest problem they have is the temperature. The sun in Florida is beating down on the side of their shuttle orbiter. In space it's pretty cold, and they're able to maintain a temperature of about 72 degrees after they get in orbit, but before they leave they just don't have enough air conditioning to keep their bodies at a good cool temperature, and it gets up to 95, 96 degrees inside the orbiter. For the past couple of missions, the astronauts have been wearing what's called a cool suit, a series of water-cooled tubes wrapped around their bodies that provide a certain relief from this heat, but you can imagine the tension and the pressure that they have been under since 6:51, 6:54, about the past 59 and a half minutes, since they were expecting to be well on their way and into orbit, and they've had to sit there atop this 500,000 gallons of liquid fuel and those 2 very dangerous solid rockets.
For the remaining 4 crew members to depart the shuttle Endeavour. Just about an hour ago, we did have a main engine cutoff with the countdown clock reading T-0. However, the solid rocket boosters did not ignite. The onboard computers on Endeavour did their function well. They stopped the launch sequence from reaching its termination point of launching Endeavour with booster ignition. The computers did their job as they have been programmed to do, and that is if all of the aspects of the critical launch components on the vehicle are not in their proper order, then the launch will not proceed. They are designed that way, and they perform their function as they were designed. Again, all we know at this point is that the high-pressure oxidizer turbopump discharge temperature exceeded the red line value on main engine number 3. We anticipate that it'll be a few hours before we get any more specifics as to why it exceeded the red line value. Mission managers are at this point meeting here in the Launch Control Center to further discuss it, to get more information from the engine experts, and to then follow up with a plan of action for what we will do with Endeavour and mission STS-68 from this point on.
All right, we're going to once again show you while we wait for the rest of the astronauts to come out a picture of what it looked like when the engine shut down about an hour ago.
We've had situations like this, and this has occurred 4 times before. That's 7. We have a go for main engine start. We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1. And have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
Path 101, DFS moted 102, LDB shows 1. Headed to USB, 4 miles of aboard. GLS safing is in progress. Copy, launch team.
That was at 6:54 Eastern Time about an hour ago.
The countdown clock has stopped.
CDR, perform BFS safing.
39B this evening. That decision, of course, will have to be made today on whether we will roll out.
That was astronaut Dan Bursch, who just got out, third of the 6 astronauts to leave.
Go first. So these are some tasks that the mission managers will be addressing over the next couple of days. Meanwhile, back on Endeavour, we do have another of our 6 astronauts has left the vehicle and will be standing by for the remaining astronauts to disembark and to then return back to their crew quarters, and then ultimately on back to the Johnson Space Center as a decision on this flight is made.
So things are in fairly significant flux down at the Kennedy Space Center and NASA headquarters, I'm sure, in Washington, and at the Johnson Space Center in Texas, as mission managers decide what to do next. Paul Karen, you heard what our NASA commentator Bruce Buckingham was just telling us about all this. Have you gotten any more information?
Well, we know that this is certainly going to delay things, John, as far as any upcoming launches, and that's not unprecedented. In fact, last year they first tried to launch Discovery July 17th and had problems, and the delays pushed that launch all the way to September 12th. So we could possibly see quite a long delay with the Space Shuttle Endeavour here.
Paul, thanks. We've just, I believe, gotten a phone call from NASA spokesman Jeff Carr, who says that contrary to what astronauts have told me in the past, and I told you a few minutes ago, the temperature inside did not get up to any higher than a comfortable 74 degrees, which means these astronauts are, no wonder they're smiling as they come out. And I do stand corrected. The information I was giving you was based on conversations I'd had with other astronauts about what it's like to be there on the pad, and of course I haven't had a chance to talk to this crew. Anyway, 3 of the astronauts are now out. 3 more yet to leave the shuttle.
OTC asked is on com.
In about 3 hours from right now, NASA promises that they will provide a news conference about 11 o'clock Eastern Time with mission managers, probably Launch Director Bob Seek, Mission Manager Lauren Shriver, and others, to give us what they know as of 11 o'clock Eastern Time on what went wrong, what caused it, and what's next for the shuttle. Now, what we are told is that a high-speed liquid oxygen turbo pump told the shuttle's computer that there was a problem. Here comes another one of the astronauts out. I'll try to tell you who as soon as I can recognize him. That's Jeff Weissoff, I believe. Jeff now coming out. Now the commander and the pilot, the only 2 astronauts left aboard. But back to this problem that caused the shutdown. The high-pressure oxygen turbo pump, which spins at about 24,000 revolutions a minute, was telling the computer that it was getting too hot. And that's Bob Seek talking to other people down there at the Kennedy Space Center.
Okay, great.
And I'm pleased to report to you now, contrary to something I suggested a few minutes ago, the temperature inside the crew cabin was maintained at 74 degrees for the astronauts, so they they were not heated up to extraordinary levels by what's happened over the past few minutes. Thanks. This, I'm going to guess, is pilot Terrence Weissoff coming out, because the commander, who is
shuttle launch control.
We'll listen.
Pilot Terry Wolcott, pilot for Endeavour on mission STS 68, has just departed the crew module. And keeping with tradition and protocol, the commander, Mike Baker, will be the last of the crew to leave. Once they are all out, they will depart the pad, make their way back to the operations and checkout building where their crew quarters are located, and then discuss preparations for returning to Johnson Space Center.
For those viewers just joining us after a local cable break, we'd like to remind you we're providing live coverage of a problem aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour, which caused a delay in the launch this morning. It's a problem that will probably cause NASA to have to delay the launch of this space shuttle for at least 10 days to 2 weeks. At the moment that the shuttle was expected to leave the Earth, in fact, less than 1 second before the solid rocket boosters were scheduled to ignite, the 3 main engines shut down. The reason for that, we are told, was that the onboard computer detected a situation where one of the fuel pumps that pumps liquid oxygen down into main engine number 3's combustion chamber got too hot. At least the 2 temperature sensors indicated it was too hot. Here's pilot Mike Baker. The last of the 6 men aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour is now off the Space Shuttle Endeavour. I will breathe a sigh of relief. I'm sure the astronauts that are out of there now are much happier to be away from that shuttle than on it at this particular point. NASA spokesman Jeff Carr, who called to
Commander Mike Baker,
help me let you know that the temperature was comfortable inside, also said that the shuttle maintained its integrity through all of this.
The other 5 members, 15 seconds. 12, 11, 10, 9,
There's what we saw about an hour ago as the 3 main engines started and then shut down.
3, 2, 1, and have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
Path 101, BFS moted 102, LDB shows 1. Anything received, hallmarks of us aboard. GLS safing.
Must be quite a disappointment for the astronauts, the ground managers, that they're not in orbit by now. But I'm sure when we have a news conference by NASA, now scheduled for just under 3 hours from now, the managers will tell us the system worked exactly as it should, and it could have been bad had this engine stopped shortly after the shuttle left the launch pad. There are contingency plans, and what would have happened in an ideal circumstance had the shuttle lifted off on schedule, had the computer not shut down the launch, and one of the engines failed, the shuttle would have to, could still have actually made orbit with 2 of the 3 main engines working. And if there had been other problems, it could have landed in Africa, several landing strips there, or even come back to the Kennedy Space Center. None of that happened. The astronauts are now safely off the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Those are ground crew members who are working there to make sure the crew cabin is now secure, and equipment that was put in there earlier is taken off. It'll be a couple of weeks before we get to sit here and talk about the launch of this space shuttle at least, and we'll have more explanation as to what happened and why as CNN's news continues. Daybreak.
Hello and welcome to Morning News. I'm Kathy Marshall in today for Donna Kelly. A close call for the Shuttle Endeavour a little more than 2 hours ago.
That's right. The mission was aborted just milliseconds, we're told, before the liftoff on that. Our correspondent John Holloman's here now with the latest on all that. John?
Quite an event out on Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. I'll tell you, we've got a lot to talk about here. We've got several elements to this story to show you. First of all, let's look at the last 10 seconds of the countdown before one of the three main engines on board Endeavour shut down. We'll go to that first.
We have three main engines running. 3, 2, 1. And have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
It was a moment of high tension for the entire crew there at the Kennedy Space Center. And there was less than 1 second to lift off. Shuttle Endeavour engine shut down. A computer-ordered shutdown caused, we are told, by a problem with a high-speed pump that forces liquid oxygen into the engine combustion chamber. And we showed you what that launch looked like. Later, NASA commentator Bruce Buckingham updated the situation.
We've had a main engine cutoff with very little time to spare between cutoff and liftoff. However, the onboard computers did their job well. They stopped the engines from firing and indeed aborted the launch when we had a less than perfect engine on board. The reasons for that engine not coming up to speed are still being assessed.
Okay, I copy that.
The managers are continuing to scan their computers for answers and reasons for this engine cutoff. Obviously, the first priority has been to assure that the crew is safe, and indeed they are reporting in safe.
So the six-member crew is now off the shuttle. They are in fact safe. Technicians and managers are meeting to figure out what happened to cause this. NASA's just released pictures from several cameras pointed directly at the engines. Some of the pictures black and white, others are in color. We'll show them all to you as my colleague Paul Caron joins us from the Kennedy Space Center. Paul, what are NASA officials telling you about what happened?
Well, so far, John, what they're looking at is that pump that you had talked about. And right now, they're still looking at the computer data in there, and they really don't know, or they're not saying yet exactly what went wrong with that pump.
Yeah, there are three engines that we are now seeing visible on television as you talk, Paul. As I understand it, there are a couple of temperature sensors that feed into the computer from that engine, and one of these got so hot that it crossed a line, what they call a red line, meaning it was much too hot, and the second sensor was showing that the temperature was rising as well. What does this mean to the Space Shuttle program, not only this mission, but the next mission?
Well, it of course affects the next mission, which was scheduled to take off in just 3 weeks from today, actually. And what it does now is anybody's guess. NASA engineers are huddling right now to see when Endeavour will take off next. It could be a few weeks. It could be up to a month even as far as a delay. And of course, that bumps into the next scheduled launch here, which would be the Space Shuttle Discovery, which was originally scheduled for mid-September. Now it's anyone's guess as NASA engineers are trying to sort all that out here right now, John.
Okay, there are several possibilities, and I guess we'll know more about all this, Paul, when NASA holds its news conference, which you'll be attending in about 2 hours from now, to give us more information on what happened and why. It's scheduled for 11 o'clock Eastern Time today. The NASA mission managers to tell us everything they can tell us up to this point, Leon, about what went wrong and how it will affect the space program.
Interesting. Just seconds.
Anything like this ever happened before that you recall?
Well, they've had 4 previous situations where the main engines in their little 5-second test phase have fired up and then shut down, but nothing that happened this close to the instant where they light the solid rockets. The thing that's interesting about this is the 3 liquid-fueled engines, the main engines, can be shut down manually after you start them up, which is what happens. But once you light those solid rockets, it's like a firecracker. You can't put it out. It's going to leave.
Boy, and as long as the astronauts are safe, that's good.
That's the best news of all.
All right, thanks, John. I'll check with you later on that.
Okay.
Another news this morning, Coast Guard cutters rescued...
Second before liftoff, the Space Shuttle Endeavour had a serious problem. The onboard computers sensed temperatures that were too high and a high-speed turbo pump pushing liquid oxygen into the combustion chamber. Here's where the pump is located on the side of the main engine. When the computers saw the high temperatures, it aborted the launch less than a second before those huge solid rockets on the side were to be fired.
We have 3 main engines running. 3, 2, 1. And have main engine cut off.
GLS safing is in progress.
GLS safing is in progress.
That safing procedure took quite a while. Shuttle Commander Mike Baker told CNN he and his crew are obviously disappointed their mission was delayed. At the moment of the abort, the astronauts had to make the shuttle safe so they could leave it. I asked Baker about the level of danger between the abort decision and the time he left the orbiter.
So it's kind of hard for me to assess. Obviously, the vehicle is ready to launch. All the systems are ready to go. The engines have fired. There's some concern for fire on the pad, some concern on the fire by the main engines, but Fairly quickly, we leave the water system running, and fairly quickly on, we heard that there were no fires that they could detect with any of the systems that they have on the pad.
NASA managers now expect the Endeavour mission to be stalled for at least 3 weeks and possibly longer. Launch Director Bob Seek says he and his crew had a similar reaction to that of the shuttle crew.
I don't know how you spell "aw shucks," but that's the term that applies. But seriously, the focus then is making sure that you have a safe system out at the launch pad for the crew. Engine shutdowns, you hope, are as benign, as it were, as this one, that all the valves close and everything works the way the computers are programmed. But and that's what you look for, and because if that doesn't go per the plan, then there's manual activity, procedures that the launch team has to execute with the flight crew, and the more timely they're done, the safer you are. So the focus is on getting everything out there safe.
Seek says the most danger to the crew after the abort was that liquid hydrogen, a highly explosive chemical, would have somehow been ignited by any kind of electrical spark while the astronauts were throwing those switches. If that had happened, the result could have been disaster. But the NASA safety system worked, we are told, and after the 3 engines are replaced and tested, Endeavour and its space radar lab will fly again.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks for staying on top of that one for us.